Good morning, Tom LeGrand here again, hijacking John Roy's desk for one more week and enjoying our time here doing some Sunday school lessons for Pelham Road. Had the Furman Cup as always. And if you'll notice, I'm wearing the same outfit I was wearing last week because it's actually this week and we're recording these ahead of time. So that's all good. But nonetheless, we're here to talk a little bit about the New Testament and how the New Testament is formed and what it says to us. So want to talk a little bit today about an issue of Jesus being either spiritual or historical. Now, years ago, there was a group that got together, a group of historians and Bible scholars known as the Jesus Seminar. And they began to meet in what was called a quest for the historical Jesus. Now, they didn't come up with that idea. That idea goes back to Bible scholars at least 100 years, maybe more than that. That we need to find out who Jesus was and what Jesus did from a historical perspective. That we need to understand what he did and didn't do from a historical perspective. But it caused quite an uproar. I think this started in the 80s and went into the 90s. I know it was an issue during my seminary days in the 90s. And the uproar was, well, what are these guys doing deciding what's right and what's wrong, or what's historical and what's not in the Bible? Now, of course, as some Bible teachers are prone to do, present company excluded, of course, these guys and girls, these men and women got pretty arrogant about how they went about their business. And it became a thing of where they would simply vote. And you voted by putting a colored marble into a box, and however many colored marbles came up, you would decide among 200 scholars, well, that's a historical fact, well, that's not a historical fact, well, that may be historical, and they kind of divvied up the Bible in that way. That's kind of bad history as well as bad theology in a lot of ways. Now, that's not to say that some interesting scholarship didn't come out of that, and some interesting readings didn't come out of that. But it does cause a problem for those of us who take the Bible as a spiritual guide for life. What are we supposed to trust? What are we supposed to believe? And how do we deal with that if we decide that certain things in the Bible did happen or did not happen by simple matter of putting a colored marble into a box and then divvying up what we think was true and what we think was not true? Lots of great scholars, some great preachers were involved in that. Some people that I enjoy reading and have learned from, even though I disagreed strongly with a lot of their conclusions. I did learn a lot from studying those issues. So here's the question. Can we reduce Jesus to the facts that we historically determined, or do we view his story as spiritual and not worry about the facts or proving or disproving the facts? And the answer to that, I think, and I'm going to suggest that we really can't do either one. First of all, Jesus is not limited to a provable commodity. The work of Christ is not limited to a provable commodity. I can't prove most things in the Bible. The miracles that Jesus performed and the people that he healed and the resurrection, to me, is fact because of what my heart tells me and what my mind tells me, and because I do believe the words of Scripture. That doesn't mean I can prove that to someone who does not believe that or who does not feel that same way. I don't know that I could come up with enough historical data to be able to prove that to anyone. But to me, it's just as true as if I had read it in a book and it happened yesterday. It is accurate to me. It is fact to me. So we can't limit Jesus to being a provable commodity. But we also have to be careful about limiting what is spiritual and saying that God is only concerned with the spiritual facts of Jesus, the spiritual truth of Jesus, because that's kind of an unintended insult to what God does in Jesus Christ. If only the spiritual matters, then why become a physical being, a living, breathing reality of the presence of God here on earth? So we kind of have to figure out a way to do both and, not either or. To say that God is only spiritual and is only concerned with spiritual matters kind of means our life here doesn't matter. And it may in turn mean that Jesus' life here didn't matter. But to reduce God to simple historical facts is to also limit God and to say that we can determine the truth or the mind of God. And we don't have that power. Part of the reason we believe what we believe is that we believe God is greater than us, and we're very glad He is. If I'm as smart as God, we've got a problem, a big problem. So we want God to be bigger than history, but we also don't want to reduce Him to some way out there spiritual being that doesn't care about what we're doing here on earth. So how do we look at that? And the New Testament story that I went to talk about that, and this has been a problem, this has been a discussion among New Testament scholars since the day the books were being formed. There was a group in the New Testament world called the Gnostics, and they said that the physical world didn't matter, only the spiritual world. So you could do whatever you wanted to in the physical world, it was only the spiritual that mattered. And there were all kind of groups that had these different ideas about the spiritual versus the physical. So it's always been a thing. It's always been a problem. And the fact that we're still talking about it today, it's a problem of life, and it's a problem of spirituality versus the reality in which we live. And it's just something we have to work through and have to continue to talk about in order to try to do our best to get it right. So what story could we look at in the New Testament that kind of illustrates this? And I came to Zacchaeus. And it says in Luke chapter 19, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Now, most of us, at least people of my age, are going to retract and revert to the song they learned in Bible school about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus being a wee little man was he. He climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And that song ends with, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm going to your house today. And that's the end of the story. Love that song, loved it as a kid, but that's not the whole story. And what we have to keep in mind is that Zacchaeus experiences a physical and a spiritual transformation in this. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. The song's actually pretty accurate. Jesus gives a command, and he says, hurry up and come down. Something is about to happen. Something is about to happen in the real world. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and quite often in Luke we hear Jesus accused of eating with tax collectors and sinners. Zacchaeus was a Jewish citizen, most likely, a citizen of the Jewish nation as well as a Roman citizen in this world. So it's especially egregious that a Jewish person would be a tax collector, and quite often they were both and. Tax collectors in the ancient world were hated way more than the IRS has ever been hated in this world. And if you can't believe that, think of it like this. Most people in the ancient world could not read or write. The Romans did not care how much money tax collectors got as long as the Roman government got their cut. So if Zacchaeus was a tax collector, he could tell you owed $100 when you only owed 25. You didn't know the difference. They didn't have it, you didn't get a notice on your computer or a letter in the mail telling you how much you owed this year. You didn't file your return and then get that back from the Roman government. He could take that $100, give 25 to the Romans, and keep 75 for himself. And that was quite often the case with tax collectors, which is why they were so hated, that they would take money from their own people, from other Jews, and give part to the Roman government and keep parts for themselves. So for Jesus to do this, and he doesn't just say, hey, I need a tax collector in the crowd. Can we get one, please? He finds this guy because he knows this guy's looking for something. And he picks him out and says, get down out of the tree. I'm going to your house. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions I will give back to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. And this is the key to our discussion of the historical Jesus versus the spiritual Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Jesus doesn't say, well, it doesn't really matter what you do in the world. Just make sure you're right with God. Make sure you say the sinner's prayer. Make sure you confess yourself, and then you'll be okay. Jesus says, no, you do need to get spiritually right. I'm calling you out for that. But I am also calling you out to do something about it. Not to simply say you love the Lord and you love God and all those kind of things. You need to take action. And Zacchaeus, and he doesn't say do it next week or do it when you feel like it, do it when you get ready. He says today. Today is the day. So we see Jesus clearly making a difference in the present, in the historical present. And that's actually the tense that is used here in this passage at different points. He's saying that right now something needs to change. But he's also saying, I am coming to change people spiritually so they can act historically. I come to seek and to save what is lost so that people can take action in the present. When we talk about the need to help the poor and we talk about the need to bring equity and justice to people, it's not about something that we do by getting spiritually right. It's getting spiritually right to prepare ourselves to act in this time in history in which we live. And whatever's going on in our history right now, we're called to speak into it. No, it's not the same as it was back then. And no, we can't tell everything, every word. We didn't have tape recorders, we didn't have video, and like we do now, they couldn't pull out their iPhone and say, this is exactly what Jesus said. But we know that the meaning of Jesus speaks into every era and every generation. So even if it didn't get right word for word, we know that what Jesus did here has meaning then and it has meaning now. It's not just about the spiritual and getting ourselves spiritually right. It's about physically acting in the world in which we live to make a difference. When you think about your spiritual life and you think about the spiritual life that Jesus is guiding you to, remember that that spirit is always leading you to do something and to take action. What that action is may be different for all of us. We have different gifts and different things that we're all called to do. But we are called to do something. And the thing we cannot do is nothing. Let Jesus lead you spiritually to act in the world historically.